I have fond memories of being able to use the train, and my mommy used to always take the train to work and back again. Our children today won't know what it was really like.
The train was safe. We used to travel with it a lot of time, but suddenly it was gone. We were struggling. We're struggling a lot because the train was at least cheaper than the buses or the taxis. People are traveling to other places for work. Children also at school. They are suffering.
People borrow money from each other just to get to work because the trains are not running anymore, and now it means they have to budget. I'm just wondering, will the trains ever run again?
Cape Town is a city a shade under 5 million people now, and it is also a unique city in the sense that it's built on this very sharp peninsula. That geography means naturally people are spread out away from that peninsula. That's exacerbated by apartheid spatial planning, which has put poor black and colored residents of our city at very distant peripheries of the urban geography. That makes for a serious public transport challenge. You've got to move 5 million people around a city. It's very tough to do that just on road. And at the moment, that is what we are doing because of the collapse of passenger rail. This has huge costs for people. We know the figures about families spending 30–40% of their monthly income on public transport costs. Totally unsustainable. That's a devastating cost when you are barely making ends meet. On top of that, it obviously has economic efficiency costs and so harms the economy overall. So it is really something that is crucial to sort out, both for the here and now, to make the city work better now, but also for Cape Town's future. One day, in the not too distant future, it will happen sooner than we all think. Cape Town will be a city of 10 million people. And it must have a functioning, efficient, relatively high-speed, relatively low-cost rail system to make a city like that work. There's no other way to move that kind of volume of people around.
The taxi rank that is close to me is Kuyasa. The taxis from there is from 5 o'clock until 8 o'clock. So after 8, there's no taxis. So if I'm traveling from here to town, then I must go to sightsee, and then I must pay 15 rand for local. I'm going to Sea Point, then I'm using 3 taxis. Here from here to sightsee, from sightsee to town, and then to town Sea Point. I'm almost spending close to 2,000. That is the money that I'm using monthly for my traveling to town. And next month, the taxes are going up. I won't be able to save. Sometimes there's few groceries, and then I won't be able to buy those groceries because I have to go to work. I must work, I must earn that little money, and then I must use it for transport. Because the taxi is the only fastest thing that I can use if there's no trains. Because the trains, I know, the train, it starts at 4:30. So 4:30, I'm there. By 6 o'clock, I'm in town. There is no traffic. So I was saving a lot also. But now you can see the space that most of the money I'm using for traveling.
The right to affordable, safe, clean and quality transport that is reliable and to trains that function in that way, impacts on working class rights to education, to housing, to be able to enjoy sport, to be able to come to the city and just walk around it, to go to a beach, to get to a hospital and a clinic. Those things are what the trains used to do. But primarily it is used for people getting to work and to school and to university. And literally, as a consequence of state capture and the destruction of Prasa, you've had a situation where a security guard who works here in the city will find themselves paying 1,000 rand extra because of the shutting down of the Central Line, which is the most important line in the city of Cape Town.
The Central Line was the busiest line within the Prasa network. We were transporting about 744,000 people as the Western Cape on a daily basis. And about 400,000 of those were coming from the Central Line. The Central Line actually runs within Cape Town Station. It's on the Metro Southeast. So it starts from Cape Town Station on the CBD, and we go through Langa, then we go down towards Philippi Station. It then splits. At Philippi, it splits into two directions. One from Philippi to Captain's Club, servicing our Mitchells Plain community. Then it goes from Philippi on the other direction towards Khayelitsha, and it ends at Krizani, servicing our Khayelitsha community.
The overwhelming amount of people that live in Bonteheuwel work outside of Bonteheuwel. They don't have the means to have their own form of transport, so they desperately need to make use of public transport. When rail was up and running, it gave people the opportunity to use a cost-effective form of public transport that allowed them to save, that allowed them to invest, that allowed them to put money into other things like better schooling for their children, etc. But with the collapse of rail, they needed to find alternative forms to get to and from work and wherever they needed to be. And that effectively meant that they were spending up to 2/3 of their disposable income on taxis and buses. And the end effect of that is that there's no savings being done. And effectively, a lot of those people lost their jobs because they couldn't get to work on time. They couldn't get to work. It was extremely difficult to get to work. What was worse is that the fewer of them were effectively going to work to get paid just to go to work.
The Central Line plays a very pivotal role into the lives of our community members, particularly here in Langa, because you find that most of the people here in Langa, they either work in town or in the industrial areas around Mutual on the Central Line to town. So it plays a huge role in transporting them to their workplaces, plays an economic role as well. So it's been a huge downfall to the people of Langa not having access to the railway. If you are a person who's working as a domestic worker and all of a sudden now you have to spend over 60% of your monthly salary for transportation, that means that you have less money to spend on bread and milk and supporting your kids. So it's a huge problem that we have.
Prasa has been a target of state capture since its inception. This state capture required the breaking down of Prasa's ability to run, to have adequate oversight, to have adequate procurement processes, to have a good IT system, to have a competent workforce, to have adequate security. Here we can really see the insidious nature of state capture. It's so clear with the case of Prasa, where the systemic breaking down of a state-owned entity has resulted in poor performance of that state-owned entity and the suffering of people who rely on the service.
The breakdown of that line started in 2017, in December 2017. And we were promised that it was going to be opened in a month's time. Then it took 6 months. Then it functioned for a little while, totally unreliable, totally unsafe, but it functioned. Then literally it has been shut down since 2019 to now, with countless numbers of promises that it will be fixed. Meantime, what had happened? Around the World Cup, and because this was ordered, a company called Siangena subcontracted without contracting to Prasa, initially charged 6 million rand to ensure that the station, the egress and entry is controlled automatically, which frees up ticket collectors to be safety patrollers and on the trains like in Gauteng. They were meant to install CCTV cameras. They were meant to ensure that the communication system from central operations at Prasa reaches every station in the train. That was what they were paid for. What then happens is they get an illegal contract after that, which then moves up to 12 million rand a station. And within a couple of months, we end up at 32 million rand a station and a 4.5 billion rand contract, which was totally unlawful. Pay before delivery. So if you're doing some work on something, you get paid first and then you deliver. That just doesn't make sense. The equipment they buy, totally inflated prices and the specs made for them. You'd had cameras installed looking towards the wall. You had the wrong type of camera installed that you put in a ticket office, a camera with a range of 10 kilometers. Prasa took Siangena on review in the brief moment where there was a spring of cleaning out, a spring clean by Popo Moleife's board and by people like Martha Ngoyi, a whistleblower, and Fanny Dingiswayo and Tiro Lele, and Ernest Hendricks in Cape Town, the late Ernest Hendricks, who exposed to us through whistleblowing that 80% of Prasa security guards were not trained, and more than half had criminal records, and none of them virtually had zero registration. The second thing is Prasa stopped paying security guards properly. So you have month after month after month where security companies, which are illegally contracted, they don't get the money they owed. And then on top of it comes 2019. And what happens in 2019? The board of Kanisile Kweyama, who we believed was going to be a good board, she cancels the contract without anything in place. Now, literally, the people who destroyed the stations were the security guards, largely. They were the security guards who suddenly, not only had they suffered under Prasa's whim and arbitrariness, but suddenly found themselves without jobs. What they did can't be justified, but it can be understood.
The services were deteriorating around 2019. The then Minister of Transport instituted a process called the War Room in order to recover these particular services. However, a decision to terminate contract security was taken in 2019 October. 2019 October, what then followed was that 3 days later, on the 3rd of November, because we didn't have any security at all, there was theft of overhead wires at between Netreg and Nyanga, so we couldn't run the Netreg line. So the services were suspended on the 3rd of November, 2019.
Even before COVID, PRASA and Transnet were under tremendous strain of a couple of pressures. Corruption and mismanagement at a national level in the management of the organization, like so many of our state-owned entities, has weighed heavy on Transnet's and all of its subsidiary operations, and PRASA included. Then there was a failure to properly protect infrastructure, a failure to invest in that infrastructure, which meant that it was becoming increasingly fragile, increasingly unreliable, breaking down often. And then there was absolutely, definitely a sustained campaign of what can only be termed terrorist attacks to destroy the train infrastructure. Cape Town went through this massive spate of train burnings. They were absolutely deliberate, they were absolutely arson, and they were absolutely determined to destroy the ability of the trains to compete with other modes of public transport, shall we say, euphemistically.
When COVID happened, the Central Line found itself in a perfect storm. Lockdown from March 26, 2020. Our stations are left vulnerable. We don't have contracted security. Rails were suspended. So all PRASA employees were at home because movement was restricted during COVID. You don't have static deployment, people that were at the station to look after it. You do not have people inside vehicles in order to move in between. We lost everything.
On top of the COVID epidemic, you saw an absolute epidemic of theft and destruction of public infrastructure. It reached levels never seen before. It was an explosion, really, where we had kilometers of track being stolen, where we had every cable, hundreds of kilometers of cable being stolen, stations being stripped down to just down to concrete bases. It literally happened within a matter of months because there was no one there. Because the infrastructure was not being used, it was vulnerable and it was taken advantage of nearly overnight.
So this community behind me called Siyahlala was developed during the lockdown, as most of the communities on the railway line within Cape Town. This particular one, it began very in small phases. As the community leaders, we tried to intervene to say that let us try and not, occupy the railway line, as it is food for many of us and food for many of our community members. So over time, the community behind me developed to what you see now, with over 1,000 shacks that are there now. And it's been difficult, entering in negotiations with the people who are living there, our residents. Langa was going to be the first community which was going to be relocated into a piece of land that was already identified. But upon identifying that land, those negotiations fell apart because there were a number of political reasons. The community where we were going to move people rejected the movement. And so at this particular point in time, we are only dealing with rehabilitation of the actual station, and we have not been able to move even with an inch in terms of relocating the people who are staying in the central line at the moment.
The law in South Africa makes it extremely difficult to move people who have illegally occupied a place because of the protections that we offer in our constitution and in our law and the various judgments that have been built up over time, which mean that you must provide alternative accommodation at the public expense even if a piece of property is illegally occupied. Which is why it's so critically important to protect your property up front. The point that I've often made to PRASA, I was not the mayor at the time, but there's ample evidence to show they were warned that that occupation was going to take place. The city offered them law enforcement assistance to stop it when it was taking place. They failed to take up that offer. They failed to stop the occupation. Now it cannot be up to the city to solve it.
(1863) was the first train that ran from Cape Town, Eersterivier, Stellenbosch, Wellington. What that means is that we have been focused as an organization just on running trains. Now we needed to deal with areas that are not within our expertise. Human settlement issues. How do you move people that have invaded the railway land? How do we then move them to a suitable area? PRASA does not have that particular mandate. Luckily, it sits within the Human Settlements Department that is currently assisting us. So there were issues of acquiring suitable land and consulting with receiving communities before the relocations are being done. As PRASA, we have all of the building blocks in place in order to recover the central line. However, you cannot put a rail track when there are people sitting on top of the track. There are social issues that we need to deal with in those communities as South Africans. There are serious gangsterism issues that we need to deal with. We started experiencing this construction site hijack. People with AK-47s come to the station and they tell you you have to leave now. If you don't comply, then violence is perpetrated against you. And they take videos shooting. When we started working towards Langa now, Cape Town to Langa and Langa to Bellville via Pontieva, and we had to deal with securing the environment within which we work. But even with the environment that we secured, 2 of our colleagues were shot, and they remain paralyzed to this day. We stopped work, that was in June last year. We stopped work, we went out. We came back again in July to start working. August 3rd, we had additional shootings. We had additional shootings again on the 17th of August last year at Netrecht. There's a place there we call Greefgat. We are very afraid of the place. end of August, we stopped work again because the security plan that we had implemented was no longer sufficient to protect PRASA contractors and PRASA employees to recover that particular stretch. Sometimes we get a security threat against the securities that we have posted there, where people that are traveling in Kumbis, they come in, they accost the guards that we have posted at the different stations. We have to quickly send additional reinforcement in order to protect the lives of those particular guards. It's people with extreme arms that are demanding something that I as a government official cannot give, because government does not have a policy of paying bribes. It is not an easy environment to work with. Not easy in a sense that it is an extremely violent environment. People's lives are at risk. People that we have lost people that we have worked with in that particular community. Leaders that have worked for years within that particular community. They were assassinated. We are paying through our lives and blood in order to get that particular corridor running.
Lois was born in 1982 and I was born in 1976. So there is that age difference between, and I regarded him as my younger brother. So Lois was not just a friend, but as somebody that I mentored also in terms of the community struggles. And Lois was against poverty, Lois was against unemployment, Lois was against the bucket system, Lois was against poor water in our community. So that was Lois. Because you see, his vision was to eradicate the so-called informal settlement. This one of Metro Rail, Loiso was approached by many officials from the Metro Rail because they understood him to be very close to the people, including myself, particularly those people who decided to build their shacks in the railway line. They decided that Loiso needs to be involved either way in this kind of a project. Loiso was able to convince those communities at least to move their shacks from where they are. Lois was trying to find a space now, whether PRASA or the city of Cape Town buy a particular portion of land so that our people can have at least serviced plots. But the problem now was around the companies. The company that was employed specifically for the security. When the company did not pay the people, then Loiso tried then to intervene. That's where Loiso's troubles came from. He got then calls threatening him. These criminals, their targets was Loiso from the onset, because immediately Loiso said amen after praying before the meeting started. Then I'm told that the shooting started from then. They said it's about 19 bullets. They made sure that Loiso is dead. They never left that train station until Loiso is finished, because most of the bullets, according to them, were in his behind. So there was no way that Loiso would survive. Even his face was full of bullets. So immediately after they killed Loiso, I'm told they went inside to apologize to those that they injured because of they wanted to specifically, they were told, go and kill Loiso. Our thinking, our blame also is on Prasa. Prasa knows, because I was there at the beginning of this, from Langa. I was also part of the people who were removing people there. But what I've noticed, that there was too much criminality. Gangsters, everybody else was around in that project, because it was made public that it will be billions of project. So it attracted a number of criminals also to look for their particular stake in that particular project. So Prasa, I blame them in particular when it comes to Loiso's death, because they were supposed to at least give him security. So Loiso died fighting for the people. Nobody now will have a courage like Loiso. Nobody, including myself. Because I took a decision, even long Loiso entered there, that I have a family to look after. I have other things. Well, Loiso, if Loiso is comfortable to take that, he has that kind of a courage to take that, he can do it. But I'm telling you, where I'm standing, nobody would want to put his or her life in danger if Prasa does not provide that particular individual with the bodyguards or security. But you see, from government point of view, not only Prasa, you can see that there is also no willingness that the trains must come. Loiso would fight with them, but unfortunately, they did not protect him. He's gone now, and he's gone forever.
We have train drivers murdered. We even have security guards murdered. We have people who should be on trains who are too scared to get on a train. I'm talking about Prasa workers. It is a cocktail of murder and mayhem. And the mayhem is the destruction of infrastructure.
It became a cesspit of crime, and it really opened up the extortion racket on the Central Line, where gangsters said that no work will happen without them being part of it. And this is why people die on this railway line.
I do think that the city would be able to do a better job, not just in running trains, but in integrating trains into the city public transport grid. We could also do a better job by applying the city's management principles, the same principles that have made this a reasonably successful city in comparison to other places in South Africa. We could apply those same basic management principles to the management of the trains. We could use our own law enforcement to help protect it better. We have to agree to get these trains moving, and the best way to do that is to devolve them to us let us take them over and manage them.
Initially, and what must happen first, is a boundary wall must be built across the areas that are most affected by gangsterism, cable theft, vandalism and crime. Unfortunately, what's happened in this case is that PRAS has gone in the opposite. They've replaced overhead cables, they've replaced rail tracks, but they've left gaps, they've left spaces wide open for gangsters to return, for vandals to return, for extortioners to return, to continue the murders on the rail line.
There's no reason that the fencing shouldn't be up to protect the last bit of rail and metal that is there. We've been promised a wall. We've been promised a wall around all the rail lines, probably for 20 years, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe less than 20 years. But it feels like 100 year of promises. Still, you weep when you see there's no wall. 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, and now 2024, we are told that the Central Line will open then. Clearly, despite the best efforts of our regional manager, the national government who control PRASA have failed in every respect.
In isiZulu bathi asiphelelanga. It is an expression that we use to indicate that one of us is not here. In the army, they always do it after they have lost some of their comrades. Those soldiers can't scream anything, can't say anything. And their brothers in arms that are next to them, they understand the silence when a name of a person is called. We can call for the name of Loyiso Nkohla today. He will not say a word. But for us to get the trains there, we are paying. And the price sometimes includes our own lives.